In the summer of 1924, a demolition crew in Shelby County, Alabama, tore up the floor of an old plantation forge, a forge that had not fired since before the Civil War. They were clearing the land for a new road, routine work. Nobody expected to find anything. Under a stone slab near the back corner of the forge floor, a slab that did not belong there, that bore no markings and served no structural purpose, they found a cavity, roughly 3 feet wide, 18 inches deep. Inside it, a stack of iron plates, each one roughly the size of a family Bible, wrapped in oilcloth that had long since hardened to something like bark. The foreman picked one up, turned it over in his hands, ran his thumb along the surface, and felt something. Shallow impressions punched into the metal. Letters, numbers, symbols arranged in careful rows. He had no idea what he was looking at. Neither did anyone else. Not for 32 more years. This channel investigates the histories that were deliberately buried, cases sealed because the truth was too dangerous to acknowledge. Hit subscribe. We open a new sealed file every day. Tomorrow, we're releasing a case from Louisiana, 1878, a parish courthouse where 3 separate judges all signed the same man's death warrant on the same morning, and not one of them had ever met him. That file is already waiting. Drop a comment right now. What state are you from? Because what happened in Alabama in the 1850s may not be as far from your home as you think. The newspaper story ran on August 14, 1924. 3 column inches below the fold. Strange iron tablets found during roadworks, purpose unknown. That was all. The Shelby County Gazette gave no further detail. There was no follow-up piece. No archaeologist was called. No historian was consulted. The 147 iron plates were boxed, labeled with a question mark in a county clerk's ledger, and placed in storage at the Shelby County Municipal Building, where they sat on a shelf between a box of unclaimed property deeds and a crate of Civil War-era surveying equipment. They sat there for 32 years. In the winter of 1956, a woman named Miriam Aldcott was working as a staff researcher for the Birmingham Courier, a mid-sized Alabama newspaper with a reputation for covering stories the larger papers considered beneath them. She had been assigned to write a feature about a local historical society's acquisition of several boxes of municipal documents, routine county materials, nothing flashy, the kind of assignment given to the least senior reporter in the room. She later wrote that she almost didn't open the box marked Iron Tablets, Origin Unknown, 1924. She was glad she did. Miriam Aldcott was not a historian. She had studied journalism at Auburn and had spent 5 years covering agricultural policy and county budgets. But she was, by every account, extraordinarily precise. She kept detailed notes. She asked questions nobody had thought to ask. And when she turned the first iron plate over in her hands under the fluorescent lights of that storage room, she noticed something that 32 years of county clerks had not. The characters punched into the iron were not random. They were not decorative. They were names, dates, relationships. She recognized the format instantly. She had spent months the previous year covering a court case that required her to read pre-war plantation records. What she was holding was a genealogical record. Someone had punched an entire family's history into iron. To understand what Miriam Aldcott had found, you have to go back to the Deveaux Plantation in Shelby County, Alabama, specifically to the year 1851, and to a man whose name appeared on more of those iron plates than any other. His name was Solomon. In the plantation's official ledgers, the ones kept in the main house, recorded in the owner's handwriting with careful attention to inventory value, Solomon appears simply as Solomon, blacksmith, appraised $900, acquired 1847. That is the full extent of his official documentation. No surname, no age confirmed, no record of where he came from before the Deveaux family purchased him from a trader out of Montgomery. He was a blacksmith. He had been trained as one, possibly since boyhood, somewhere in the decades before he arrived in Shelby County. The plantation records note only that he was skilled at the forge and that his work required no supervision. That last detail matters enormously. A blacksmith on a working plantation was not like other enslaved workers. He operated in a separate structure, the forge, away from the main house, away from the fields, away from the constant proximity of oversight that defined most enslaved people's daily existence. He worked with fire and iron and hammer, with tools that were his responsibility to maintain and his alone to operate. He was given a degree of physical autonomy that most enslaved people never experienced, not because the Deveaux family trusted him in any moral sense, but because the forge produced things the plantation needed: horseshoes, hinges, wagon hardware, tools, and that production required a skilled hand working at its own rhythm. He also worked alone, often late into the evening when the light was gone and the forge fire was the only thing burning on that end of the property. Miriam Aldcott, piecing this together in the winter of 1956 from a combination of the plates themselves and surviving plantation records, wrote in her notes, "He had privacy, he had iron, he had time, and he was watching everything." What did he see? He saw families sold apart. He watched children loaded onto wagons in the early morning before anyone had fully woken up, shipped to plantations in Georgia and Mississippi and Louisiana. Children who left without any written record that they had ever existed on this property, without any documentation of their names, their ages, their parentage. He saw people die of illness and overwork and violence, and he watched their names disappear from the world the moment the breath left their bodies, because there was no one keeping a record of them that included their full humanity, only the plantation ledger, which recorded the financial loss. He saw marriages, unofficial, unrecognized by law, but entirely real to the people who made them, dissolved without ceremony when one partner was sold. He saw births recorded nowhere. He saw a community existing in almost complete documentary silence, as if the system had decided that the most thorough way to erase a people was to ensure they left no paper trail at all. And sometime around 1851, Solomon made a decision. He could not write, or if he could, he knew better than to let anyone see him doing it. Paper was dangerous. Paper could be found. Paper could be read. Paper could burn. But iron, he understood with the precision of a craftsman, was harder to destroy than almost anything on earth. He began keeping records. Each plate was roughly 11 inches by 7 inches. The iron was a 1/4 inch thick, sturdy enough to survive indefinitely if kept dry, thin enough that a single man could carry 4 or 5 of them without attracting attention. The punched characters were small but consistent. Miriam Aldcott noted in her 1956 research that the letterforms were practiced, not the marks of a man learning as he went, but of someone who had developed a system and executed it with discipline. Every plate followed the same format. At the top, a family name, rendered in the spelling Solomon had heard spoken aloud and transposed as best he could into the characters available to him at the forge. Below it, a relationship structure, a father's name, a mother's name, children listed in order of birth. Where relationships were uncertain, he used a system of punctuation, a small triangle mark that Miriam eventually decoded as meaning believed to be related to, rather than confirmed. Birth dates were listed where known, and where not known, Solomon used a notation system of his own invention, a horizontal dash followed by a season, a question mark followed by a decade approximation. Deaths were noted with a single punched mark at the end of a name, a vertical line bisected by a small cross, which Miriam recognized from her reading of other period documents as a common informal symbol for death. Sales, the forced separations that tore families apart, were noted with an arrow and a direction indicator, east, west, south. If Solomon knew the name of the destination plantation, he punched it in full. If he didn't, he punched the direction and the word gone. That word appears 43 times across the 147 plates. Gone. Miriam Aldcott sat in the storage room of the Birmingham Courier for 3 hours after she first decoded that detail, saying later only that she needed some time before she could continue. Just when we thought we understood the scale of what Solomon had built, the archive reveals something that changes everything. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit that like button to support our content, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's discover together what happens next. 147 plates. When Miriam Aldcott finally arranged them in sequence, by family, then by date of the earliest entry she could determine, she realized that Solomon had not been keeping a simple record of the Deveaux Plantation's enslaved community. He had been keeping a record of the entire region. Some of the families documented on the plates never appear in any Deveaux records at all. Their names match, where cross-reference was possible, with records from neighboring plantations in Shelby, Bibb, and Chilton counties. Names that appear in the Deveaux forge records as repair work or tool commission, neighboring plantation owners sending hardware to Solomon's forge, correspond to family entries in the Iron Archive from those same properties. He had used the forge itself as a gathering point. Men from neighboring plantations bringing tools for repair or commissioning work would spend time at the forge while Solomon worked. Some of them may have known what he was doing. Some of them may have given him information deliberately. Others may simply have talked, the way people talk when they are somewhere that feels, for a few hours, like a place where the normal rules are slightly suspended. And Solomon had listened and remembered, and later that night, under the light of the forge fire, had punched what they told him into iron. The plates document, by Miriam Aldcott's 1956 count, 423 individuals across at least 11 different Shelby County properties. 423 people whose existence had been officially recorded only as property values and labor units. Solomon gave them their names back. He gave children their parents. He gave parents their children. He gave people their ages, their relationships, their history, the basic documentation of human existence that the system surrounding them had decided they did not deserve. And he hid it under the forge floor, under a stone slab, in a cavity he must have carved out himself over weeks or months of patient, quiet work, doing it in the way he did everything, methodically, carefully, in the space where no one watched him closely because no one believed a blacksmith was capable of anything that required watching closely. But we need to pause here because there is something Miriam Aldcott did not discover until the very end of her research, something that would not become fully clear until a team of historians at Auburn University re-examined the plates in 1989. Go back for a moment to 1865. Emancipation came to Alabama in stages following the conclusion of the Civil War. Solomon, whose full name it turns out appears on one of the plates, is listed in a Freedmen's Bureau record from late 1865 as having left Shelby County. The record notes his occupation as Smith and his destination as unknown. He left. He left the forge, he left the county, he left behind 147 iron plates hidden under a stone slab in a floor that he had every reason to believe might be torn up at any moment. He left them anyway. Why? The Auburn historian's 1989 analysis offers one possible answer. By 1865, Solomon had been building the archive for 14 years. The war was over, the plantation system was collapsing, and Solomon may have understood something that the demolition crew in 1924 would confirm, that the plates were safer where they were than anywhere he could take them. Iron buried under stone in an abandoned forge does not burn. It does not decompose. It does not get lost in a move or stolen or confiscated by someone who recognizes what it is. He left them where they were the safest thing in Shelby County. He trusted the iron. Of the 147 plates, one was different from all the others. Miriam Aldcott found it near the bottom of the excavated stack, one of the last plates laid down, she estimated, based on the degree of oxidation and the position in the cache. It was slightly smaller than the others, as if it had been cut from a piece of iron that all Solomon had left. It documented one family, his own. The plate listed a woman's name, his wife, Miriam believed, though there is no surviving record that confirms the relationship. Below her name, 2 children, a son, birth year approximated as 1848, a daughter, whose name is followed by that single punched mark, the vertical line bisected by a small cross. She had died. There is no age given, there is no cause listed. Below the family entry, separated from the rest of the record by a double line, a format Solomon used nowhere else in the archive, was a phrase, 5 words, punched in iron with the same careful precision he had applied to 422 other people's histories. We were here, we were real, and then below that, 3 more words, remember us. Miriam Aldcott's notes from that afternoon contain only a single sentence. She wrote, "I understand now why he used iron." The question that remained, the one that would haunt Miriam Aldcott for the rest of her career, was whether Solomon ever knew that anyone had found what he left behind. If this story is moving you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's follow this to the end. Miriam Aldcott filed her initial report to the Birmingham Courier in March of 1956. Her editor was a man named Harlan Birch, who had been running the paper for 11 years and who prided himself, by his own account, on publishing stories that mattered to people in this state. He read her report, he set it down, he asked her how many words she needed. She told him she needed as many as the story required. He told her she could have the whole front page of the weekend edition. The story ran on a Saturday in April of 1956. It was titled, "Iron Cannot Burn: The Hidden Archive of a Shelby County Blacksmith." The response was unlike anything the Birmingham Courier had received in its 40-year history. Within 2 weeks, the paper had received more than 300 letters. Some of them were from historians and archivists requesting access to the plates. Some were from civil rights organizations, citing the archive as documentary evidence of what the formal historical record had systematically omitted. And some were from families, descendants of the people's names Solomon had punched into iron 100 years earlier, people who had grown up with family stories, fragments, rumors, half-remembered names passed down through generations, with the caveat that there was no proof, no paper trail, no way to confirm what the old people said they remembered. They had proof now. A woman in Birmingham wrote that she had been told her grandmother's grandmother was from Shelby County, sold south sometime in the 1850s, and that her name had been Celia. There is a plate in the archive with that name, a woman named Celia, sold in 1857 with the direction marked south and no destination given. A man in Montgomery wrote that his grandfather had told him stories about a forge, about a blacksmith who was the only one who remembered everything, who kept track of who belonged to whom when the system tried to make them forget. He had grown up thinking it was a family legend. It wasn't. Miriam Aldcott spent the next 8 months conducting interviews with 53 families. She filled 11 notebooks. She was not a crier by her own admission. She describes herself in a 1972 interview as someone who preferred to keep emotion at a professional distance. But she writes that on the evening after her 14th family interview, a meeting with an elderly woman in Tuscaloosa who had brought a worn photograph of a man she had been told was her great-great-grandfather, a man who might have been the son listed on Solomon's own family plate. She sat in her car in the parking lot outside the woman's building for 45 minutes without moving. She writes, "I kept thinking about what it means to know your own name, to have it written down somewhere, to be able to point to a record and say, I was here, I existed, someone counted me as real enough to document." He did that for 422 people. Mostly he did it in secret, in the dark, at the end of a long day, after the fire in the forge had burned down and the plantation was quiet and nobody was watching. And then he left, and he never knew if anyone found it. I've covered a lot of stories in my career. This is the only one that made me feel like I had a responsibility I wasn't sure I was equal to. Miriam Aldcott's 1956 series in the Birmingham Courier, it ran across 3 consecutive Saturday editions, was submitted for a Pulitzer Prize the following year. It did not win. It was not shortlisted. The plates themselves were transferred to the Alabama Historical Society in Montgomery in 1958, following a year of negotiations between the society, Shelby County, and a coalition of historians and community advocates who argued successfully that the archive should be treated as a primary historical document rather than a municipal curiosity. They are there today, all 147 of them held in archival-grade storage in a humidity-controlled environment, cataloged and cross-referenced, and accessible to researchers who make formal requests. The Auburn University historical team that re-examined the plates in 1989 published a monograph that expanded Miriam Aldcott's original identification significantly. Using the cross-reference data from neighboring county plantation records, they were able to match 271 of the 423 individuals in the archive to at least one other surviving document, a court record, a Freedmen's Bureau entry, a post-war census notation. In 271 cases, those matching records confirmed the accuracy of what Solomon had punched into iron, sometimes decades before any other document existed to corroborate it. He was right every time. His memory or his network or his combination of both was precise. The 1989 report noted, The archive demonstrates a degree of observational and documentary rigor that was, in the context of its time and the conditions under which it was created, extraordinary. The man responsible for these records was, by any reasonable definition, a historian. Solomon's own family plate, the one with the 5 words at the bottom, is the only plate in the archive that does not appear to document anyone else's history. It is his alone. The Auburn team noted that among the 147 plates, his family plate is the most worn. The corners are rounded in a way the others are not. The oilcloth wrapping on that particular plate was more heavily layered, wrapped and rewrapped, evidence that it had been handled many more times than the others. He kept returning to it. Over 18 years, he kept taking it out and putting it back. Whether he added to it or simply held it, there is no way to know. If you found a stone slab in a floor that didn't belong there, would you lift it? If you did and you found 147 iron plates covered in names you couldn't read, would you spend the next 8 months learning what they meant? Or would you put the stone back and walk away because the road needs clearing and the schedule needs keeping, and some things buried that long are probably better left alone? Miriam Aldcott lifted the stone. She spent 8 months. She filled 11 notebooks. She wrote later that she never met Solomon, obviously. He had been dead for decades by the time she held his work in her hands. But she said she felt over those 8 months of interviews and research and late nights with the plates spread across her desk that she understood something about him. She wrote, "He was a man who knew exactly what he was doing and exactly why and exactly how much it cost him to do it quietly and carefully for 18 years while the world he was documenting tried to make itself easy to forget. He knew nobody might ever find what he made. He did it anyway." Solomon left the Deveaux Plantation in 1865. There is a single Freedmen's Bureau record that places him in Shelby County in October of that year. His age is listed. He appears to have been approximately 45. His occupation, smith. After that, there is nothing. No census record, no death record, no burial record that anyone has been able to locate. He walked out of the county and out of the documentary record in the same year he had been keeping other people's records for 18 years. He became, in the official archives, exactly the kind of ghost that his iron plates were designed to prevent. Whether he knew in those last months before he left that the archive was complete enough to stand on its own, whether he felt in some craftsman's sense that the work was done, there is no way to know. What we know is that he wrapped the plates in oilcloth. He placed them in the cavity under the stone slab. He covered the slab. He left. And then he trusted that iron would outlast everything that wanted to bury it. He was right. The plates are in Montgomery, all 147 of them, in a climate-controlled archive next to a copy of Miriam Aldcott's 1956 research notes, which were donated by her family in 2003, 3 years after her death. The last plate in the collection, Solomon's own, is behind glass, under the family record, under the names of his wife and children, under the small punched cross that marked his daughter's death with no age given. 5 words, then 3 more. We were here. We were real. Remember us. Solomon disappeared from the record in 1865. He would be over 200 years old today. The iron he left behind outlasted everything that tried to erase it. If this story moved you, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear what Solomon built. Tomorrow, Louisiana, 1878. 3 judges, 1 death warrant, 1 mourning. That file is already waiting. Subscribe. We open a new sealed file every day.
Subscribe to the sealed files for the hidden histories they tried to erase. Hit the bell. We open a new sealed file every day. Tomorrow's case is already waiting. Don't miss what history buried.